In the brutal, unforgiving world of professional boxing, everyone has power. Every single man who steps through those ropes has trained for years, sacrificed everything, and truly believes, that he is dangerous enough to end a fight with one punch. But here is the truth that separates legends from contenders. Power is common. Speed is common. Heart is common. What is not common is the ability to take everything your opponent throws at you, absorb their energy, redirect their aggression, and use their own momentum to destroy them. That is not boxing. That is an art form. And for over 2 decades, one man has been the undisputed master of that art. A man who does not chase knockouts. He engineers them. A man who does not throw wild punches. He sets invisible traps and waits, with the patience of a surgeon, for his opponent to walk straight into them. His name is Saul Canelo Alvarez. And today on Counterpunch, we are going deeper than the highlights. We are going deeper than the knockouts. We are going all the way into the mind, the mechanics, and the mastery of the most complete fighter of his generation. Stay with us, because by the end of this video, you will never watch a Canelo fight the same way again. To truly understand what Canelo Alvarez became, you have to understand where he came from. Saul Alvarez was born on July 18, 1990, in Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico. He was the youngest of 8 children in a family where boxing was not just a sport. It was a way of life. His older brothers all boxed. The gym was as natural to Canelo as a playground is to other children. He turned professional at just 15 years old. 15. While most teenagers are worrying about school, Canelo Alvarez was already inside professional boxing rings, learning the hardest lessons that this sport can teach. Now, here is what makes that early period so fascinating. Canelo was not a spectacular knockout artist in those early days. He was not knocking people out in the first round with video game power. What he was doing, even at 15, 16, 17 years old, was developing something far more valuable. He was developing patience. He was developing the ability to read a fighter, to study them, to figure out their rhythm, their habits, their tells. Because every fighter has a tell. A little twitch before they throw the right hand. A slight drop of the shoulder before the left hook. Most fighters never notice these things in the heat of battle. Canelo noticed everything. His trainer, Eddie Reynoso, who has been with him since the very beginning, understood something profound about this young red-haired kid. He was not just physically gifted. He was mentally gifted. He processed information inside the ring at a speed that most fighters never develop, even after decades of experience. By the time Canelo was in his late teens, he had already compiled a record that most professional boxers will be proud of at the end of their career. But more importantly, he had developed a style, a philosophy, a way of fighting that was entirely his own. He would let you come to him. He would let you feel like you were winning. He would let you get comfortable. And then, at the exact moment you felt safest, that was the moment he would take everything away from you. All right, let's get technical. Because this is where Counterpunch goes beyond every other boxing channel. We are not just going to tell you that Canelo is a great counterpuncher. We're going to show you exactly, mechanically, biomechanically, how the trap works. Let's start with the foundation, the stance. Canelo fights in an orthodox stance, but his feet are never static. He is always adjusting his weight, always shifting slightly, always in a position where he can move in any direction within a fraction of a second. This sounds basic, but most fighters compromise their footwork the moment they are under pressure. They get flat-footed. They get stiff. Their feet stop working. Canelo's feet never stop working. Now, the second layer, the guard. Canelo uses what coaches call a high shell defense. Both hands are kept up, elbows tucked in, shoulders roll forward slightly. This accomplishes several things simultaneously. First, it protects the body and the chin at the same time. Second, it makes him look like an open target, like there are gaps to attack. And third, this is a genius part, it actually invites his opponent to commit to big punches. Because when an opponent throws a big punch, they expose themselves. They shift their weight. Their chin comes forward. Their guard drops on one side. That split second of exposure is all Canelo needs. Now here is the third and most critical layer, the head movement. Canelo's head movement is not flashy. It is not the dramatic, wide slips you see from some fighters. It is millimeter precise. He moves his head just enough, and only just enough to make the punch miss. Sometimes the difference between the punch landing and missing is literally 2 or 3 inches. Why does this matter? Because the smaller the movement, the less energy he wastes. And the less energy he wastes, the faster he can return fire. When Canelo slips a right hand to the outside, his body is already coiling. His weight is already transferring. His left hook is already loading up. From the moment the punch misses to the moment his counter lands, we are talking about fractions of a second. This is not reaction time. This is anticipation. This is Canelo reading the punch before it is even thrown and having his response fully loaded and ready to fire. The fourth layer is the body work. This is the element that most casual fans overlook completely. Canelo is relentless to the body. He throws hooks to the liver, uppercuts to the solar plexus, short rights to the ribs, round after round after round. Why? Because body shots accumulate. They do not show up on the scorecards the same way head shots do, but they are silently destroying your opponent's ability to fight. By the 7th, 8th, 9th round, that fighter who was moving beautifully in the early rounds is now slow. His hands are dropping because his body hurts too much to keep them up, and when those hands drop, Canelo is right there, waiting with everything he has. This is the full anatomy of the trap. Bait, set, spring, destroy. Now, let's walk through the fights that built the legend. The early Canelo era, the 140 to 154 pound era, was a masterclass in a young fighter developing his craft in real time against real professional opposition. When Canelo fought Jose Miguel Cotto, he was still a teenager stepping into the ring with a seasoned, experienced professional. Cotto came out aggressive, throwing heavy right hands, tried to establish physical dominance early. And here is where you could already see what Canelo would become. He did not panic. He did not fight back emotionally. He absorbed the early pressure, studied it, and began to make adjustments. Round by round, he figured out Cotto's rhythm. He identified the patterns. He saw that Cotto liked to load up on the right hand after throwing a double jab. So he waited for the double jab. He waited for the right hand. And then he made it miss, came back over the top of his own right hand, and went straight to the body. Once Canelo locked onto that rhythm, Cotto had no answer. The referee stopped the fight when Canelo let loose a barrage of unanswered shots that Cotto simply could not defend. The Josesito Lopez fight told a very similar story, but with even more brutality. Lopez was a tough, courageous fighter. He was not going to go away easily. And for a while, fighting off the ropes, he was actually giving Canelo some problems. But Canelo never lost his composure. He kept working the body. Left hook to the liver, right hand to the ribs, left hook to the liver again. By the middle rounds, Lopez was carrying tremendous punishment in his body. And when your body hurts that much, it becomes almost impossible to maintain your defensive structure. Your hands want to go down to protect your ribs. But when your hands go down, your head is unprotected. Canelo dropped Lopez 3 times before referee Joe Cortez stepped in to end the punishment. 3 knockdowns, each one a direct result of the body work that had been laid down in the earlier rounds. Canelo was not just winning these fights. He was teaching lessons in how to systematically dismantle a human opponent. If you want to show someone who has never watched boxing before exactly how elite-level counterpunching works, you show them the Austin Trout fight. This was Canelo at 22 years old, stepping in against an undefeated, highly regarded southpaw who many people believed had the style to seriously trouble him. Trout was tall, rangy, technically precise, and dangerous with his left hand. The boxing world expected a close, difficult fight. What they got instead was an absolute clinic. From the opening bell, Canelo took complete control of the distance. He was not chasing Trout. He was cutting off the ring, methodically, patiently, using his footwork to take away Trout's angles. Every time Trout tried to move, Canelo was already there, waiting for him. And then came the moments that made the boxing world stop and take notice. There were sequences in this fight where Canelo would stand directly in front of Trout, hands down, almost relaxed, and invite him to throw. Trout would throw a combination. 4, 5 punches. And Canelo would roll and slip every single one of them, making this elite professional southpaw look like he was trying to punch a ghost. Then, in that tiny window right after the last punch, Canelo would unload, and Trout, who had just committed his weight and energy to a full combination, had absolutely no defense left. The defining moment came when Canelo landed a massive right hand that buckled Trout's legs and sent him to the canvas for the very first time in his professional career. But honestly, the knockdown was almost secondary. What made this performance iconic was the psychological dimension. Canelo was not just beating Trout physically. He was humiliating him technically. He was showing Trout and the entire boxing world that his best offense was completely ineffective. That is the deepest form of defeat in boxing, not just losing, being made to look helpless. By this point in his career, Canelo was no longer a prospect or a contender. He was the main event, the pay-per-view draw, the man everyone wanted to watch. And two fights from this era stand above everything else when it comes to demonstrating the absolute lethal nature of his counterpunching. First, James Kirkland. Kirkland was a knockout artist, a man with raw, explosive punching power who had announced himself to the world with a series of devastating knockouts. He came into the fight with a plan. Get in early, get in fast, and end it before Canelo could establish himself. For a brief moment, it looked like it might work. Kirkland came out throwing absolute bombs, trying to overwhelm Canelo with raw aggression and power. But Canelo had seen this before. This was exactly the type of fighter his entire style was built to defeat. He weathered the early storm. He did not panic. He moved, he covered. He absorbed what he had to absorb. And then, methodically, deliberately, he began to take apart Kirkland's offense. Body shots first, then uppercuts in tight, then a short, perfectly timed right hand that short-circuited Kirkland's system completely. The final shot did not just knock Kirkland down. It rendered him completely unconscious on his feet, and he fell like a tree that had been cut at the trunk. But if Kirkland was a statement fight, what happened with Amir Khan was something else entirely. Something almost cinematic. Khan was one of the fastest boxers on the planet. Genuinely world-class hand speed. And for the first 5 rounds of that fight, he used it beautifully. He was moving, jabbing, throwing sharp combinations, and getting out before Canelo could return fire. On the scorecards, Khan was ahead. And then Canelo did something that defines exactly who he is as a fighter. He slowed down. He stopped trying to match Khan's speed. He accepted that Khan was faster. And he started doing the one thing that neutralizes speed better than anything else. He started working the body. Round after round, he punished Khan's body. Not spectacular shots. Not crowd-pleasing combinations. Just steady, accumulating damage to the ribs and the liver, systematically taking away Khan's energy and his movement. By round 6, Khan was slowing down. The combinations were not quite as crisp. The feet were not quite as quick. The energy was draining. And Canelo felt it. He felt the exact moment when the time was right. He threw a feint to the body, just enough to make Khan's hand start to dip, and then unleashed a monstrous overhand right that traveled straight to Khan's chin with every ounce of Canelo's power behind it. Khan was unconscious before he hit the canvas. Completely, instantly out cold. His head hit the ring floor, and the arena went absolutely silent for a moment before erupting. That shot was not lucky. That shot was a product of 6 rounds of deliberate, calculated setup. Canelo had spent 24 minutes of fight time creating the exact conditions for that one punch to land. That is not punching. That is engineering. No conversation about Canelo Alvarez is complete without talking about Gennady Triple G Golovkin. Golovkin was, at the time of their first fight, widely considered the most dangerous middleweight on the planet. A relentless pressure fighter with an extraordinary punch, an iron chin, and a record that included 23 consecutive knockouts. He had broken every opponent who had stood in front of him. When the boxing world learned that Canelo and Golovkin were finally going to fight, it felt like the immovable object was about to meet the irresistible force. The first fight, in September 2017, lived up to every single piece of hype. Golovkin came forward like a freight train, as he always did, throwing heavy-handed punches and trying to cut off the ring. But Canelo used his shoulder roll, and his head movement to make Golovkin miss more than he had ever missed before. And every time Golovkin missed, Canelo made him pay with sharp, precise counters. 12 rounds of absolute warfare. At the final bell, both men were standing. The scores were controversial. One judge somehow scored a draw, while most observers had it close but leaning toward Golovkin. But what mattered was what the world had seen. These two men were perfectly matched. And perfectly matched meant they had to do it again. The rematch in 2018 was, if anything, even more intense. Canelo came into that fight with a completely revamped game plan. He was more aggressive. He was taking the fight to Golovkin rather than waiting to counter. He was showing new dimension, that he was not just a counterpuncher, but a complete, well-rounded offensive fighter as well. The decision went to Canelo, again, controversially, but the performance was undeniable. And then the trilogy fight in 2022 provided the definitive answer that the boxing world had been waiting for. By this point, Canelo had grown, matured, and added an entirely new level of physicality to his game. He dominated the later rounds of the trilogy fight and won by unanimous decision. 3 fights, a combined total of 36 rounds. And through all of it, Canelo's core system, the patience, the body work, the perfectly timed counters, never broke down. After the Golovkin trilogy, Canelo shifted his attention to super middleweight. And what he did there was nothing short of historic. He systematically collected every single major world title at 168 pounds. The WBC, the WBA, the IBF, the WBO, all 4 major sanctioning bodies recognizing the same man as their champion simultaneously. Undisputed, the only undisputed super middleweight champion in the history of the sport. Along the way, he stopped Billy Joe Saunders, the slick, technically brilliant southpaw who had never been stopped in his career. Saunders tried every trick in his considerable arsenal to neutralize Canelo. He moved. He tied up. He used angles. He tried to make it ugly. But Canelo's body shots were relentless. And in the 8th round, a right hand to the side of Saunders' head fractured his eye socket. The fight was stopped between rounds when Saunders could not continue. He stopped Caleb Plant, the IBF champion who had trained meticulously for the fight, who had studied every Canelo performance, who came in with a detailed defensive game plan. Plant executed it brilliantly for several rounds. And then Canelo landed a right hand that dropped Plant for the first time in his professional career, and a follow-up combination ended the night. And he stopped Rocky Fielding, a naturally bigger man who had the size advantage that Canelo has rarely enjoyed, with pure, relentless body punishment that broke Fielding's will and his ability to continue. Each fight, different opponent, different challenge. Same system, same patience, same result. But perhaps the most remarkable demonstration of Canelo's versatility and intelligence came when he decided to move up 2 full weight classes, from super middleweight all the way to light heavyweight, to challenge Sergey Kovalev for the WBO title. Kovalev was a massive light heavyweight with a history of absolutely destroying opponents. He had genuine knockout power in both hands and a reach advantage over Canelo that was significant on paper. On paper, this fight looked almost irresponsible for Canelo to take. In reality, it looked like a masterclass in systematic hunting. Canelo came out in the early rounds and did something that surprised everyone. He let Kovalev punch. He absorbed some of the bigger shots to establish in his own mind, and in Kovalev's mind, that the power was manageable. He was testing. He was studying. He was cataloging. Kovalev threw thousands of punches in that fight. He was active. He was aggressive. He thought he was controlling it. And through the first 10 rounds, there was a legitimate argument that he was winning. But Canelo was working. Every single round. He was working the body. Every single round, he was absorbing information. Every single round, Kovalev was expending energy while Canelo was conserving it. And then round 11 arrived. Kovalev had spent 10 rounds fighting at his maximum output. His legs were heavy. His hands were dropping slightly. The combinations were not quite as crisp. The damage had accumulated in ways that were not visible from the outside, but were absolutely devastation internally. Canelo waited for the right moment. One perfect right hand to body. And then, as Kovalev's guard dropped in response to the body pain, an absolutely monstrous left hook straight to the temple. Kovalev went down, and he did not want to get up. 11th round knockout. 2 weight classes above where he normally fought, against a man with a significant size and reach advantage. That was not just a win. That was a statement about the limits of what Canelo Alvarez is capable of. Here is something that nobody talks about enough when they discuss Canelo Alvarez. The physical damage is obvious. The knockouts are obvious. The body work is obvious. But there is a psychological dimension to fighting Canelo that is arguably the most devastating aspect of the entire experience. When you fight Canelo, he makes you doubt yourself. Think about what it feels like. You train for months. You study his footage. You develop a game plan. You come into that ring feeling prepared, feeling ready, feeling confident. And then in the first round, you throw your best punch, your sharpest jab, your hardest right hand, the punch you have been working on every single day in training, the punch that has troubled every sparring partner you have faced. And Canelo moves his head 2 inches to the left, and it misses by a fraction. And then he smiles. That moment, that tiny, almost imperceptible smile, has broken more fighters than any punch Canelo has ever thrown, because it communicates something that goes directly to the deepest, most primal part of a fighter's brain. It says, I see everything you have. I know everything you're going to do, and there is nothing you can throw that I am not already prepared for. The best fighters in the world, men who have been training since childhood, men who have faced every type of opponent imaginable, have come into the ring against Canelo and found themselves paralyzed by that feeling. Not physically, not because of his power, but because his calmness, his certainty, his absolute composure in the middle of a firefight communicates a level of mastery that is genuinely intimidating. This is what separates Canelo from other great counterpunchers. He does not just defeat his opponents physically. He defeats them mentally first. And once you have defeated a man mentally, the physical destruction that follows is almost inevitable. So where does Saul Canelo Alvarez rank in the all-time history of boxing? This is a question that the sport will debate for decades after his career is over. The statistical case is extraordinary. Multiple world championships across 4 weight classes. Undisputed super middleweight champion. Victories over a roster of opponents that includes multiple Hall of Fame level fighters. A professional record compiled over more than a decade at the highest level of the sport. But statistics only tell part of the story. What makes Canelo truly special? What separates him from other great champions who compiled similar records is the style in which he achieved everything. He did not win by being the biggest. He did not win by being the most powerful. He did not win by throwing the most punches or by outworking his opponents in terms of sheer volume. He won by being the smartest man in the ring, every single time. He won by understanding something profound about the nature of combat, that the most efficient way to destroy someone is not to use your own energy, but to redirect theirs, to take their strongest weapon and turn it back on them, to let them believe they are winning until the exact moment when everything collapses. The great boxing historian Burt Sugar once wrote that the sweet science is not about how hard you can hit someone. It is about how intelligently you can hit them, how you can create the conditions where your punch lands perfectly while theirs misses completely. By that definition, Canelo Alvarez is the purest practitioner of the sweet science that this generation has ever produced. Canelo Alvarez did not just learn how to box. He learned how to think inside a boxing ring at a speed and a depth that the sport has rarely seen. From that 15-year-old kid from Guadalajara, throwing his first professional punches, to the undisputed champion who hunted down Sergey Kovalev 2 weight classes above his natural home. The thread that connects every single chapter of his career is the same. Patience, intelligence, the willingness to absorb pressure so that his counter can land with devastating precision. The trap is always the same. The opponents always fall into it. Because when you're in the moment, under the lights, with the crowd roaring and your body pumping with adrenaline, it is almost impossible to remember that the trap is there, even when you know it is. That is the genius of Canelo Alvarez. And that is the sweet science at its absolute highest level. Which Canelo performance do you think was his greatest? The Austin Trout clinic, the Amir Khan knockout, or the Kovalev masterpiece at light heavyweight? Drop your answer in the comments below. We want to know. If you learned something today, hit that like button. Subscribe to Counterpunch. Turn on notifications, because we're just getting started. More tactical breakdowns, more fight analysis, more deep dives into the greatest minds and the greatest moments that boxing has ever produced. We will see you in the next one.